Hey everybody, it's me, Marcy Sheward. I'm in my own kitchen this morning. I just got back from Superstore. I picked up a beef tenderloin. They're on sale this weekend. Well, they're available this weekend. They're not usually a stocked item. So now when it's a long weekend like Thanksgiving or Easter or Christmas, they always have well, in the past anyway, they've always had their beef tenderloins and their prime ribs on special. So I don't know what the regular price is because it's not typically stocked, but judging from the cost per kilogram of steaks and roasts, it's about half when you buy it this way in a Cryovac pack. So it's Canadian beef, it's AAA. So I'm all for it. Now, if you go to Walmart and get your beef, it'll be Angus beef. So if you like your beef a little bit more marbled, maybe that's where you want to get it. But today I shopped at Superstore and it's $19.80 a kilogram when you buy it this way. So this one is 3.7 kilograms and so it was $75. But in their flyer, and they never talk about this too much in advance, but in their flyer it shows that tenderloins, when you buy them, you get 15,000 optimum points, which translates into $15 off of your next grocery bill. So I'm counting this as a $60 piece of meat. All right, so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to cut it into steaks, and I like my steaks, you know, 1.5 inches, maybe closer to 2 inches. So I just did the calculations, and I think this will make about 10 steaks, which is 2 meals or more for our family. And so off a $60 piece of meat, that equals $30 per meal for my family for steak. And not just any steak, but tenderloin. So I don't know if you know about what makes a good steak or not, but a tenderloin is the best. It's the kind of the odd mixture of a tender, flavorful steak that has no marbling. Okay, so typically what makes a steak taste good and be really tender, like a rib steak for instance, which is my other favorite, is the fat that's marbled through it. And so you'd want to look for a steak that has nice marbling, and you'll know that that's going to have a ton of flavor and it's going to be really tender. Well, a tenderloin has no marbling. If you look at it in the bag, can you see that all this white, that's a kind of a thick cap of fat that you can actually, I was reading, you can actually use it like suet. Like it really is just a layer of fat on the outside only of the loin. So I don't trim it off or anything, but it shows that your loin isn't going to have any fat marbled through it. So for that reason, when you cook a tenderloin steak or a roast, you want to cook it with some responsive heat. So I like to barbecue them so that it cooks the outside nice and quick and it leaves the middle nice and rare. We like our steaks probably more rare than most, but it does leave you some wiggle room. So if you cut them too thin, they're going to cook awfully quick and or too slow. How about that? If you cook them too thin or too slow, they're going to cook right through, and because they don't have any fat marbled through it, they're going to dry right out. Okay, so it's just like a pork tenderloin in that it's very, very lean and very, very tender, and in my opinion, the nicest piece of the cow. So it butts right up to the rib bones, I guess. It runs down its back. So that's a muscle that's never going to get exercised, which is what leaves it so tender. It's those muscles that they use for walking and running that get really tough. You have to cook those differently. But because this butts right up against the rib, you know, that's where your prime rib will come, and that's, you know, my other favorite cut of meat. The longer it stays in the fridge, you know, not frozen, but still cryovac, that's important, the more tender it's going to get. Okay, so it's super tender today. If you want to eat them today, go right ahead. But if you do leave it till closer to the date, you'll find that it's even more tender. All right, so I'm going to cut into this. There's always a limit of 2, and they're always, the big ones always go fast. So make sure that you go early in the day on the Friday so that you can get the big ones, because if you get the little ones, like the lighter weight loins, they're not as big around, and so your steaks are quite small. Okay, so I find the bigger steaks are much easier. Oh, look at the juice. Lovely. Bright red, it's amazing. So I find the bigger steaks are easier to not dry out when I'm cooking them. All right, so here we go. It looks like a rugged piece of meat. It's amazing. It's even longer than my cutting board. Anyway, all right, so I'm gonna, I got a good sharp knife, and decide how thick you like your steaks. I like mine 1.5 inches, maybe even 1 3/4 inches. So I'm gonna cut off just the tiny little end here, and that'll be a scrap, I call it. And then I'll go, you know, that, it's probably 2 inches. This is so decadent, you guys. It is so tender. Look at that. It's hardly any marbling at all. And you know, the texture, it's plump, it's gonna be great. So when you go to cook these, like how I like to freeze them is individually, so that when I go to cook them, I can just take out as many as I need. So I'm gonna try and cut them all even thicknesses so that they cook at the same pace on the barbecue. So you don't wanna cut it, you know, crooked, because one end will be done long before the other end. So get your knife nice and sharp and make nice long slices through the roast, okay? Oh, this is lovely. So a month or so ago, we had a birthday in our house, and the birthday girl requested tenderloin steaks. And I didn't have any in the freezer, so I actually went to our local butcher shop, and I bought one, I bought 5 steaks. It was about that long, and it was one meal for our family. I should have weighed it. I can't even remember what it was. But it was $55 for my 5 little steaks. They were much thinner than what I'm cutting here. And I'm gonna get 10 steaks out of this $60 piece of meat. So to put it into perspective, if you like a good steak, this is as cheap as a typical steak in the grocery store every day of the year. So if you think ahead a little bit and do a little bit of prep with it, you're gonna have some great steaks. Okay, so the end of this roast is going to get thin, and it gets kind of pointy even. Okay, so I cut these just a little bit thicker, and then when we cook them, we stand them on the barbecue and just kind of spread them out, just kind of plump them up a bit. Okay, so we still do cook the little tiny steaks at the end, but I do cut them just a little bit thicker because they cook really quick. So this is the only bit that wasn't made into a steak, the 2 ends, and the rest are glorious. So I'll call these 2 little ones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I got 13 steaks out of a $60 piece of meat. And not just any steaks, they're tenderloins. So now I'm gonna freeze them. So I bought these kind of Ziploc, it's called Perfect Portions bags. They're really paper thin. And so I'm going to just put each steak into its own bag and set it here on my sheet pan. Let me see what I can do so you can see. I'm going to put each steak in its own bag, and then I set it on the sheet pan so that they freeze individually. And after they're frozen good and solid, I'm going to go and I'll tie up all these bags, and I'll store them in a, I don't know, a box or a bag or something in the freezer, so that when we're gonna have steaks, and we do barbecue steak all winter, so when we're gonna have steak, I'll just go and take out as many as we need for that day. I'll pile them all here on my sheet pan so that I can put them into the freezer, and they're all separate and loose. And once they're frozen, I will put them all together in a I don't know, a big Ziploc bag or maybe some kind of a freezer container. It's a pretty precious commodity. There we go. That's 3.7 kilograms worth of steak, 13 steaks to go into the freezer for whatever day we're gonna barbecue them. That won't be today, but I'll be ready when it's time. And then I won't be forced to go to the local butcher shop on an off season and pay premium. But anyway, because we do like these, it's definitely worth the time invested. I hope you give it a try. The difference between a tenderloin and you know, say a T-bone steak is immense. Take good care, everyone.